Welcome back to another episode of Next Gen DDS. This is your co-host, Wes Lyon. As always, in the other co-host chair, Dr. Scott Menaker. Scott, welcome back.
Hey, great to be here, Wes. Looking forward to today's episode. I think we'll get a lot of people, a lot of our young docs, and interested in kind of the idea of what are the benefits of owning a practice.
Yeah, it's funny. I was at UNC last week, and we had a great group of students there, and a lot of questions, and seemed like a lot of information they didn't know. So hopefully we'll be able to talk some people. I think we're very pro-ownership, so let's start with our bias. However,
for sure, and it's what I get, as I talk to dentists around the country that are looking to buy in, and I'm helping represent them. There's, I think they get overwhelmed a little bit sometimes by the debt potentially that they're going to take, but they don't really understand kind of. It's more than, and we're going to talk a little bit today probably about the financial benefit, but we're really going to talk about some of the other benefits of being an owner and having control over what's happening versus kind of working for somebody and just showing up when you're told to show up and doing kind of what you're told. Sit down and shut up is the old expression we used to say.
Definitely. To be fair to our bias, though, I think our bias exists because we know how beneficial it can be, and we want what's best for the young doctors out there. And
absolutely.
I think there's a bias on the other side, and that bias, though, is to get doctors to be associates, and that's really to make the wheels on the corporate bus turn. It's not really for the benefit of the young doctors. And
it's even the wheels on the private owner, because I worked as an associate. I also had an associate before my last Trish became a partner. But you're making money if you're doing it right. You should be making some funds for on the some profit on what the associate is doing. So there are some financial goals here that we'll talk a little bit about.
Definitely. I think there's three main things, though, maybe even four. One, there's big tax benefits to be a small business owner in America. A lot of things you can take advantage of to really keep more money in your pocket, get more into savings. Two, you are your own boss. Now that probably the first year, nobody says it's a benefit.
For sure. It can be a little overwhelming.
But after that, it can be a really, really, really big benefit. And then lastly, I think that financial one too, not just from the tax aspect, if I can cut my tax bill down, but the fact that you're actually going to make more money, you're going to have an asset that's valuable. But those are from my point of view. Scott, when you look back, you're no longer a practice owner. Does that one feel a little weird now?
It certainly, I guess, in my financial pocketbook it does, but I've done and we'll talk through a little bit of the benefits, but I used my time as a practicing dentist to save enough money via being an owner, and using retirement and profit sharing plans and those kind of things and there's more options even out there to help put away plenty of money to help make sure that I was taken care of.
Any other big benefits you think of or something you look back?
Yeah, so I think the one that we can talk through is you kind of have control over. We talk a little bit about the work-life balance, or a lot about it, is you have the ability to kind of set the schedule of when you're open and your hours and those kind of things. I think back,
if I recall right, you were pretty involved with your kids.
Yeah, for sure. And so at some point, I had three boys, and we were the sports team dreams at that point of three boys that were playing basketball and soccer and any other sport that you could probably name. They were involved in it, and I wanted to be involved in that. And so I made a decision. Originally, we had done it on a Friday where we would work a 7 to 2 hour. And I was open at that one point 5 days a week. I didn't like that, but I had gone from 2 doctors to 1 doctor, and I had to kind of maintain the hours, but I was trying to pare that down. And so we were doing it 1 day a week. And then I said, I'm ready to go do this 4 days a week. and literally closed Fridays. And basically, we've created a work schedule that was 7 o'clock in the morning to 3:30 in the afternoon. We took a 30-minute lunch. So we basically had a nice big break room. We could have everybody brought their lunch, and we took 30 minutes versus going out to lunch. My staff, I think, really appreciated it down the road, that they were saving a lot of money not going out and spending $10 or $15 for lunch every day. They were bringing leftovers and sandwiches. But the schedule was really a great thing for me because I was done at 3:30. I left, and at 4:30, I was helping coach their soccer teams. I was helping coach their basketball teams. But I was actively engaged in their lives early on versus getting home at 5:30 or 6 when they had been home from school for 2 hours or so. And it was a real personal decision for me. And I can literally, Wes, I can count one family that left me because of that. Now, the other side is I had more people coming to see me at 7 o'clock in the morning than you can imagine. And it was a lot of people wanting to go, that were going to work they could hit me before they got to work. And it was really a win-win. The additional part was I have staff that were, not everybody works around the corner. And I had a lot of staff that were driving 30, sometimes even 45 minutes to come in and see me. Well, that 7 to 3:30 hour, we beat rush hour on the front end. We beat rush hour on the back end. And a lot of them basically said they would not have worked for me if my hours were 8 to 5. So, and there's a lot of discussion. People are doing, working night hours. I tried that. That was a massive failure for me. The idea of getting home at 8 o'clock at night was not a good thing for my family.
No, and you don't really get the best patience at night either. Actually, you sometimes get the worst patience at night.
It was hit or miss. It was, half of them showed up. Some of them, nice people, but they were busy, or they got tied up at work, or they just were worn out and they were going home. But the schedule for me was one where I really could tailor it to. And it wasn't just, it was somewhat personal. I did it for my family, but it was also very beneficial for my practice. I mean, even to this day, the practice still 7 o'clock in the morning, there is no problem getting patients to show up.
No, I mean, I think patients love it, but that's something I think a lot of people take for granted, or they're not looking down the road because you imagine you're in dental school and some of them may be engaged, but a lot of them, they probably haven't started to think about this kids thing and what they're going to do. And, as busy as you may be in dental school, just wait till you run a practice and you have children running around. I mean, that's...
Yeah. And so, it's a great point because we talked a lot, and we may have in previous episodes talked about what it takes as the CEO and the time commitment that it takes. And I use that to sometimes I would go to the gym in the morning. We had it's crazy, a 5:30 basketball game that we would have 15 to 20 guys that would show up almost every day to play. But on some of those days that I didn't go, I was at my office at 5 or 5:30 doing stuff so that I wasn't having to work into the night or stay late after work. Again, that was personal. It was funny. I remember when my associate came to Trish joined me, she said, "I'm not a morning person." And I said, "You will be." And I think to this day, she still loved, that 7 o'clock time frame just turned out to be a really a good thing that you can decide to do as the owner of the practice.
Yeah, and getting to your point, a lot of it, you did it for your kids, but even just from a perspective of, hey, how much better is my life? You'll realize it later on when you can set your own hours and potentially leave early or just take days off. Leaving the office at 3:30 versus 5 opens up a world of opportunity. There's no traffic, depending on where you're living. And hey, 3:30, I want to go hit the gym and get home on time, or I want to go play 9 holes of golf. Whatever it is you want to do, it's available. 5:30 leave time, it ain't happening.
And right. And you're worn out from the day, and then all of a sudden you got to get home and you're thinking about dinner and all those things. And
I keep a gym bag in my truck it hasn't been touched in 4 weeks. It's just in case I want to go after work instead of before. The reality is, by the time I leave here by 5:36, you're not going. So, I mean, I think that's a huge one. Set your own hours. Also, time off. This is another one people sometimes take for granted, or I even talk to senior doctors about this a lot, where they're like, well, if we take off, we feel bad for the staff. I just kind of look at them like, all right, we're going to have to pay the staff like $2,000. So your profit's going to go down $2,000 for the year. And if you've got a really, really good practice, that $2,000 becomes irrelevant.
It really does.
It becomes something where you go, no, you know what? I want to take out of here for 2 weeks, and I want to take my family to this place and enjoy the vacation. And I tell doctors all the time, like, it is funny because not all of them learn it. I'm like, just shut the office down and pay the staff.
Yeah. Or, in today's world, there are lots of, I'll call them rent-a-docs that'll come and check your hygiene schedule, which it may not generate a profit, but it's generating enough revenue to pay your staff, to pay the expenses. So there are some things to do. Your practice certainly has to be in the right place. You can't do that if if it's struggling or if you're just getting started. But once you get to that place and you've built it into a certain level, yeah, you absolutely have the ability to start taking long. And it took a while until I finally said, I'm going to take a big, long trip. And it was really nice. It's kind of you get to pat yourself on the back in a way for a job well done. So, I mean, it's a great point that you get to go do that. And as you get a partner down the road or whatever, if you get to one, you then have way more flexibility to go do lots of different things. But as a solo doc, yeah, you can determine time off and vacation and when am I going to do that. You got to plan ahead, but there's some good options for you to be in control of that.
No, definitely. And I was got a real funny story about this. There was a big DSO group that was going to buy a very large practice here in Charlotte, but it was a one doctor practice, and they were excited to get a hold of it, and he was going to do the deal. I mean, they got all the way to the signing, and he's the one that told me the story, and he said they looked at him like, hey, Dr. So-and-so, one of the best parts about this is you no longer have to worry if you want to take a day off. You just, let us know. And he looked back at him and goes, I don't ask anybody permission to take a day off. I just take the day off. This deal's over.
Yeah, and
that was the end of it. People don't realize it's like, oh, my kids have this tournament in 3 months on this date. Okay, we're just going to shut down the office, or we're going to work a different day instead of that. And that flexibility is not going to exist anywhere else. But it's going to be important. You might not have kids now. You might not think it's important, but it's going to be really, really important. I mean, can you imagine going back and having a job where you had to work till 6 every night? I mean, you were a business owner and the coach of all their teams.
Not a chance.
Not many people have that opportunity in their career to actually do that or be that person. Most people, it's like, I love my dad. He worked hard, but he didn't have that opportunity.
I didn't see him. Right.
He's calling 4 other dads trying to figure out who can leave on time to pick us up, take us to the game, and nonetheless coach the game. But I think that's something that everybody should be working to buy their own practice. If anything else, just to, you're going to have to build it. You're going to have to create it where it needs to go. But once you create that flexibility, you're going to be present with your family a whole lot more than any of your peers are.
And it does go towards, as we talk about a lot, the work-life balance and just in your mental health too. Just not feeling like you're just you're slaving away and really working so hard in that. And it's one of the questions I get a lot as I talk to young docs. And Wes handles all of the business and tax planning. And how does he help, how do we help doctors save more money for retirement and while they're practicing? And so I talk a lot to them of, having a conversation with you, Wes, about the other benefits of owning a practice. So there's some while you're in it, but you got to make some plans. And, we talk a lot about, if you have a spouse, employing your spouse. There's lots of them. So we want to spend just a little time. We're not going to get into the meat of those things, but there are some great things as a business owner and owning a practice or even owning part of a practice that you get to take advantage of.
No, it's really phenomenal to your point. Like we were talking earlier, just even being able to have your spouse be a stay-at-home parent potentially and put them on your payroll to make the maximum salary deferral. So I do this, my spouse is on the payroll, and every single year, we're putting away over $50,000 just between the match coming off the practice and the salary deferral. And that's all tax deductible. So right off the bat there's not a lot of people that are able to put $50,000 away a year. It's tax deductible without doing profit sharing or anything fancy. When we do profit sharing, we're putting away $100,000 almost every year on a tax deductible basis. So the real benefit is I only really have to come up with 60 because I cut my tax bill by 40,000. Right. So if I can come up with 60, I get 100 in there. I mean, that's just phenomenal. And the ability to do that and start early and have enough money to do it. I mean, that right there. Now, I always want people to save more than this. But if you look at the doctors that, they got to retirement and they did very little. You look at their savings, like you only save this much a year. The key to it was they started that when they were like 26, 27 years old. They bought a practice, they shoved their spouse on the payroll, and they did those maximum salary deferrals. And that right there in itself gets a lot of people retired. But some other things, you can CE trips. We're going to St. Thomas in January. A lot of doctors plan their vacations around CE, and they do a little bit of CE, a varying amount of vacation. Probably in the IRS's view, we do just enough to make sure it's tax deductible, but you get to write that off. A lot of the meals get written off. You get to own a vehicle through the practice and write that off. And it's not as if you see a lot of social media CPAs, they're probably not really CPAs, but they're, giving tax advice. And there's not this big windfall where like, I don't have to pay taxes because I own a small business. However, you start adding these things up, the meals, the vacation, the retirement plan, the vehicle, kids on the payroll. You start adding all these things up and eventually you're looking and, okay, I'm saving $40,000, $50,000 a year in taxes. $40,000, $50,000 a year saved in taxes. They can go into savings to retire. If you started early enough, it's probably going to retire you.
Right. And you would encourage, so not every doc's going to get their practice initially may not be, especially our younger docs, you may not be at that level where you can do all these maximum deferrals, but you would highly suggest you're going to start to do a little bit and continue to add.
So it's funny, the deferrals, I've yet to have a doctor that can't really do them on day one if they buy a practice. Startup, different story. Right. But purchasing a practice, because when you're purchasing a practice, you've got a phantom income issue to some extent. I deal with this from buying John out. It's you write off the goodwill over 15 years. So, the goodwill is the overwhelming majority of the practice value. It's basically the value we put on the patients that keep coming through the door.
That's right.
So everything but the equipment. But that goodwill, you get a 15th of it written off every year for taxes, but you typically pay the loan over 7 or 10. So because of that, though, the cash flow is high so that you can make the payment. So that's great. But then a lot of people, they're already in that 35, 40% tax rate up at the top. So you sit there and you go, hey, look, it's, we're putting $46,000 away, but can we come up with 26, 30,000 that? Can we find 2,500 a month? Usually we can.
Yeah. And again, a lot of it's going to depend on the practice that you bought. If, we're hoping, and it's what we do from the transition side of helping docs look at that, some of those cash flow things and where's the profitability. And I was just talking to a doc the other day that he's been an associate for 5 years. The owner doctor is getting a bargain on what he's paying him. I'm not going to talk about what he got paid, but it's really, really low for where he's been for 5 years. And I just said to him, your income's he's going to probably buy this practice. I said, I haven't even looked at the financials yet, but I would say your income's going to probably triple. And there was dead silence on the other side. Now, we still haven't done the due diligence yet. I got to make sure that that's there. But if it's like a typical practice, he's getting ready to go make a massive increase in his ability to then do all the things that you're talking about. And this practice it's not doing $3 million. It's doing less than $1 million, but it's still going to be a really profitable move for him. So, there's lots of things that, you could talk about, deferring money for your kids' educations down the road. There's lots of different ways that Wes, you're recommending to doctors to cut the tax bill legally. There's nothing in here, and there's lots of bogus stuff out there, and I'm sure you hear it of, hey doctor, you should put this offshore and you could do this. But this is all legitimate things that have been done for years and years that have proven to be great benefits to your clients, to the clients here at the McGill Hill Group for so many years.
And to your point, like in this situation, this doctor's income is going to triple. Doctors who own a practice, if they got a reasonable deal, and this is kind of a good gut check if you're buying one. First off, get some representation. We're here to help. But let's just say we didn't. We're going to do it ourselves. Well, if I'm going to buy the practice and net of that loan, I'm going to make less on day one as the owner. You either paid too much, the loan is too short, there's something up.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where those are the red flags that we say to doctors, this is probably not the practice.
No. So when you buy a practice, though, you should make more, even net of the loan. And that's really, we take that little bit extra. It's not a ton. If you're sitting there and you're making $200,000, you're expecting net of the loan to clear $450 to your account as the owner. We're not talking about that much more money, but
slowly it will. And I remember when I bought.
But that's actually where I'm getting at is if you kind of go down the road, say, hey, you can do these salary deferrals, all this stuff, and then 7 or 10 years down the line, the loan drops off. And now it's like, hey, if you can be disciplined enough to not go buy the beach house or do something and just divert that money into savings,
absolutely,
you're probably retired within 15 to 20 years.
Yeah, you have the ability to go do that. And again, it's all about, as we're talking about, it's your decision from your schedule to how you're managing the practice and your deferrals and running that. You then have the ability to say, I want to do, I'm ready to go get a partner and work 2 days a week or whatever it is, whatever it may be.
A lot of the doctors just go down to 3 days a week and they say, hey, you know what? I don't really want a partner. I'm willing to let this practice go down a little bit. So I'm going to go down to 3 days a week. And then this amazing thing happens. Production goes up.
It does. My wife used to say at the end of my career, I was working 3 days a week. But I was still doing more. My wife used to always say, you're going to do more in less days. And it wasn't like I was killing myself. It was just, we were just more efficient and effective. So, that could be a whole other discussion topic, but it goes to, if you're running this practice the right way and you're taking advantage of the opportunities from a tax savings benefit, being in control of your schedule, there's lots of great things that you get to reap as the owner of the practice.
Definitely. And, one other thing I want to talk about here is just starting earlier, the benefit of it. Now, some of this is in your control. Don't get me wrong, the best day to buy a practice was yesterday. The next best one is today, and then if not, tomorrow. Now, some of you may need more training, things like that. But if you're really looking at, hey, I'm ready to do it, I'm going to wait for all these pieces, though. I'm going to pay off my student loans first, or I'm going to do this.
Absolutely right.
No.
Bad decision.
Bad decision. The best thing you can do is buy it as soon as you can handle it. And I say as soon as you can handle it because don't go buy something you can't handle and end up in a giant mess. But if you start early with all these things, you'll get the practice up and running earlier. You get it where you want it. It's going to take work. We're not going to sit here and claim this is easy. It's not. But you'll get it where you want it to where it's humming a whole lot sooner. You'll get all this retirement money going in a whole lot sooner. Everything's going to happen quicker, and it's going to get you to the promised land quicker. Because funny, the doctors almost hardest to kick out of the chair are the ones that got their practice up and running the way they want it by like 35, and it's just been humming ever since. I'm like, why would I leave? This is amazing, but the sooner you can really start this process, the better. It's the time value of money, eighth wonder of the world.
Absolutely, that's
those right. Those who know it, understand it, earn it. Those who don't, pay it. The sooner you can get this practice and everything that goes with it to start paying you off, the better off it's going to be, which, Scott, I think is a real nice segue into what our next topic is going to be. I think we should talk about, this was your idea, persistence next, because these kind of go hand in hand.
We call it the 3 Ps. So stay tuned for our next episode, and we're going to just kind of talk about how you continue.
What are the 3 Ps, Scott?
So they're patience, persistence, and perseverance. And you'll have to have those to get to this promised land. But, I think we tried to just summarize just real briefly the control that you have as the owner. It's certainly financial, but it's also work-life balance. It's your schedule. It's family time. It gives you just the flexibility to make some of the decisions that you need. Now, we don't say don't go making stupid decisions, but make decisions that are going to be in the best interest of your practice and your family. And I think that go into practice, get good advice, and be smart about what you do as you own that practice, and it will pay its dividends for the rest of your life.
It's going to be the greatest asset you ever own. And that's why the private equity groups want to own them. So if you're wondering why the DSOs are here, why they want to own these things, it's because they're the greatest thing you could own as a dentist. So make sure you get one for yourself.
For sure. Well, thanks, Wes. It's been a good episode, and we'll see you for the next one.